You're sitting across from a man in handcuffs who just told you the name of your college roommate. A roommate you never mentioned in any official file. A roommate whose existence should be impossible for any criminal to know. But this isn't just any criminal, and you're about to discover that everything you thought you knew about your own department was a lie. This is the story of FBI Special Agent Amanda Torres, a woman who thought she was conducting a routine interrogation until she realized she was the one being investigated. What started as a simple drug bust would expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of federal law enforcement. And the man sitting across from her in that sterile interrogation room would force her to choose between her career and her conscience. Before we dive into this incredible story of deception, manipulation, and betrayal at the highest levels of government, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more federal secrets that will blow your mind, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't believe how deep this rabbit hole goes. Agent Amanda Torres had been with the FBI for 8 years. At 32, she was one of the youngest agents to be assigned to the Bureau's Organized Crime Task Force in Miami. Her colleagues respected her sharp instincts, her ability to read people, and her uncanny talent for getting suspects to talk during interrogations. Amanda had grown up in a middle-class family in Phoenix, the daughter of a police officer and a high school teacher. She had always wanted to serve her country, to make a difference in the fight against crime and corruption. The FBI had been her dream job since college, and she had worked tirelessly to earn her position. But nothing in her training had prepared her for what would happen on that humid Tuesday morning in October when she was assigned to interrogate Viktor Kozlov. The case had started 3 weeks earlier with what seemed like a routine narcotics investigation. The DEA had been tracking a shipment of cocaine from Colombia that was supposed to arrive at the port of Miami. Intelligence suggested that the drugs were being imported by a Russian crime syndicate with connections throughout South Florida. The operation had gone surprisingly smoothly. Almost too smoothly, Amanda would later realize. Based on an anonymous tip, federal agents had raided a warehouse in Little Havana and arrested 5 men, including Viktor Kozlov, who appeared to be the leader of the operation. Viktor was different from the typical drug dealers Amanda had encountered in her career. He was 43 years old, well-educated, and spoke with a slight Eastern European accent that was both cultured and menacing. Unlike most suspects who either proclaimed their innocence or demanded lawyers immediately, Viktor had been cooperative, almost eager to talk. The interrogation room in the FBI's Miami field office was sterile and windowless, designed to be psychologically uncomfortable for suspects. 2 chairs faced each other across a metal table, with cameras recording every word and gesture. Amanda entered the room carrying a thick file folder, her standard practice to make suspects think the government had more evidence than it actually did. Viktor was already seated when she entered, his hands cuffed to a chain around his waist. He looked up as she walked in, and Amanda felt an immediate sense that something was off about this man. His pale blue eyes seemed to be studying her with an intensity that was both unsettling and oddly familiar. "Good morning, Mr. Kozlov," Amanda said, settling into her chair and opening the folder. "I'm Special Agent Torres. I'd like to ask you some questions about the cocaine we found in your warehouse." Viktor smiled, and there was something in his expression that made Amanda's skin crawl. It wasn't fear or defiance, the emotions she was accustomed to seeing in this room. It was amusement. "Of course, Agent Torres," Viktor replied, his accent more pronounced when he spoke formally. "Though I think you might find our conversation more interesting than you expect." Amanda pulled out a photograph of the warehouse where Viktor had been arrested. "Can you tell me about your connection to this facility?" "I can tell you many things," Viktor said, leaning forward slightly. But first, I'm curious about something. How is Jennifer doing these days? Your roommate from Arizona State University. I believe she became a veterinarian, didn't she? Amanda felt the blood drain from her face. Jennifer Martinez had been her roommate during her junior year of college, more than 10 years ago. They had lost touch after graduation, and Amanda was certain that Jennifer's name appeared nowhere in her official FBI files. I don't know what you're talking about, Amanda said, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. Viktor's smile widened. Of course you do. Jennifer Martinez, originally from Tucson, she helped you study for your criminal justice exams. You two had a falling out during spring semester because she was dating that boy you liked. What was his name? Michael? No, Matthew. Matthew Chen. The specific details hit Amanda like physical blows. Not only did Viktor know about Jennifer, he knew intimate details about their relationship, their classes, even personal drama from over a decade ago. How do you know that? Amanda whispered. I know many things about you, Agent Torres, Viktor replied calmly. I know that you graduated magna cum laude with a degree in criminal justice. I know that your first assignment with the Bureau was in the white-collar crime division in Phoenix. I know that you requested a transfer to Miami after your father died of a heart attack 2 years ago because you needed a fresh start. Amanda's hands were trembling now, though she tried to hide it by gripping her pen tighter. Viktor's information was too accurate, too personal. This wasn't the kind of intelligence that a drug dealer should have about an FBI agent. I know that you live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Coral Gables, Viktor continued, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. I know that you drive a 2018 Honda Civic Blue license plate number GLK 7492. I know that you buy your groceries at the Publix on Miracle Mile every Saturday morning, usually around 9:30. The room felt like it was spinning around Amanda. This level of surveillance suggested resources far beyond what a typical criminal organization should possess. Someone with access to law enforcement databases, financial records, and personal information that should have been protected. Who are you? Amanda asked, abandoning any pretense of conducting a normal interrogation. Viktor leaned back in his chair, studying her face with those pale blue eyes. That's a more complicated question than you might think, he said. But perhaps the better question is, who do you work for? I work for the FBI, Amanda replied automatically. Do you? Viktor asked. Or do you work for people who are using the FBI for their own purposes? Amanda tried to regain control of the conversation, to remember her training about not letting suspects manipulate the interrogation process. But Viktor's questions were planting seeds of doubt that she couldn't ignore. Let me tell you something about the warehouse where you arrested me, Viktor said, settling into what appeared to be a prepared speech. That facility has been used for drug storage for the past 3 years. Your own department has known about it for at least 18 months. That's impossible, Amanda said. If we had known about ongoing drug operations, we would have moved to shut them down immediately. Viktor laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Would you? Or would certain people within your department have found it more profitable to allow the operations to continue while taking a percentage of the profits? The accusation hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Amanda felt her world tilting on its axis as the implications of Viktor's words sank in. You're suggesting that there are corrupt agents in the FBI, she said. I'm not suggesting anything, Viktor replied. I'm telling you that your department has been compromised at the highest levels. I'm telling you that the case you think you're working on is actually a cover-up designed to protect the real criminals. Amanda stood up abruptly, pacing to the corner of the small room. Her mind was racing, trying to process what Viktor was telling her while simultaneously rejecting it as the desperate lies of a caught criminal. "Even if what you're saying were true," she said, turning back to face him, "why would you tell me? What do you gain from making these accusations?" Viktor's expression became serious for the first time since she had entered the room. "Because, Agent Torres, you're not part of the corruption. You're one of the few honest agents left in this field office. And because I need your help to expose what's really happening before more people die." "More people die? What are you talking about?" "The drugs you found in that warehouse weren't destined for street sales," Viktor said. "They were evidence that was supposed to disappear. Evidence from cases involving federal informants who were getting too close to the truth about which agents were taking money from the cartels." Amanda felt sick. If Viktor was telling the truth, then her own department was not just corrupt. It was actively involved in covering up murders. 3 federal informants have been killed in the past year, Viktor continued. All of them were investigating connections between the cartels and certain FBI agents. All of them died just before they were supposed to testify in cases that would have exposed the corruption. "How do you know all this?" Amanda asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Viktor met her eyes directly, and she saw something there that she hadn't noticed before. Not the coldness of a criminal, but the weariness of someone carrying a terrible burden. "Because I'm not who you think I am," he said quietly. "My name is Viktor Kozlov, but I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not even Russian, though I've been playing that role for so long that sometimes I forget who I used to be." Amanda sat back down, her legs suddenly unsteady. "Then who are you?" Viktor was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I'm someone who's been trying to gather evidence about the corruption in your department for the past 2 years. Someone who allowed himself to be arrested because it was the only way to get close enough to someone I could trust with the information I've collected." "You're law enforcement," Amanda said, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "I was," Viktor replied, "a long time ago in what feels like another life. But now I'm something else. Something between an informant and a vigilante, I suppose." Amanda stared at this man who had just turned her understanding of everything upside down. If he was telling the truth, then she wasn't interrogating a suspect. She was talking to someone who might be the only person who could help her understand what was really happening in her own department. But if he was lying, if this was all an elaborate manipulation designed to turn her against her colleagues, then she was walking into a trap that could destroy her career and possibly her life. "Why should I believe you?" she asked. Viktor reached into his shirt pocket slowly, mindful of his restraints, and pulled out a small piece of paper. "Because I can prove everything I'm telling you," he said, placing the paper on the table between them. "That's a bank account number. If you run a financial investigation on that account, you'll find deposits that correspond exactly with the dates of major drug seizures in your district. You'll also find withdrawal patterns that match with unexplained cash deposits into the personal accounts of 3 agents in this office." Amanda stared at the paper, knowing that picking it up would be crossing a line from which there might be no return. "And if I investigate this account and find what you say, I'll find what then?" she asked. Viktor's expression became infinitely sad. "Then you'll have to decide whether you're willing to risk everything to expose the truth, or whether you're going to become part of the cover-up to protect your career." As Amanda Torres sat in that sterile interrogation room, looking at a piece of paper that could either destroy her life or save it, she realized that she was facing the most important decision of her career. The man across from her had either just offered her the key to exposing massive corruption, or he had set a trap so sophisticated that she was already caught in it without realizing it. But one thing was certain: after this conversation, nothing would ever be the same. The comfortable certainties of her job, her department, her entire understanding of justice and corruption were crumbling around her. And she had to decide, in the next few moments, whether to embrace the terrifying uncertainty of the truth or retreat into the safe ignorance of denial. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward an uncertain future, each second bringing Amanda closer to a choice that would define not just her career, but her soul. Have you ever had a moment where you realized that everything you believed about your life was built on a lie? Where the ground beneath your feet suddenly felt like quicksand, and you couldn't tell which way was up anymore? That's exactly where Amanda Torres found herself as she stared at the piece of paper Viktor had placed between them. The bank account number seemed to pulse with significance, like a loaded weapon lying on the table. Amanda knew that the moment she investigated those numbers, she would be crossing a line that would change everything. There would be no going back to the comfortable certainty of believing that her department was clean, that her colleagues were trustworthy, that the system she had devoted her life to serving was fundamentally good. "You're asking me to betray everything I've worked for," Amanda said finally. Viktor shook his head slowly. "I'm asking you to save everything you worked for. There's a difference." Amanda picked up the paper, her hands trembling slightly as she read the numbers. They meant nothing to her now, just a sequence of digits. But she knew that within hours, they could mean everything. "If I do this investigation and find what you say I'll find, what happens next?" she asked. "That depends on how deep the corruption goes," Viktor replied, "and how much courage you have." Over the next 3 days, Amanda conducted the most careful and secretive investigation of her career. Using her access to federal financial databases, she traced the bank account Viktor had given her through a maze of shell companies and offshore transactions. What she found made her physically ill. The account had received deposits totaling over $2 million in the past 18 months. The timing of these deposits corresponded exactly with major drug seizures reported by the Miami field office. More disturbing still, the account showed regular transfers to 3 other accounts that belonged to Agent Michael Brennan, Agent Sarah Walsh, and Assistant Director Robert Chen. These weren't small amounts that could be explained away as coincidental. They were substantial sums that clearly represented payoffs for information or cooperation in drug trafficking operations. But the most shocking discovery came when Amanda traced the ownership of the shell companies back to their source. The ultimate beneficiary of the account was a corporation owned by Deputy Director James Morrison, one of the highest-ranking officials in the FBI's Miami division. Amanda spent 2 sleepless nights staring at the evidence she had gathered, trying to find an alternative explanation that would allow her to maintain her faith in the system she served. But the pattern was too clear, too consistent, too damning to ignore. On Thursday morning, she returned to the interrogation room to face Viktor again. This time, she was the one who needed answers. "How long have you known about this?" she asked without preamble. Viktor looked at her face and seemed to understand immediately that she had found the evidence he had promised. 2 years, he said simply. "Maybe longer. But that's when I first started to put the pieces together. And you're really not Russian mob." "I'm not Russian and I'm not mob," Viktor confirmed. "Though I've been playing that role for so long that sometimes I wonder if I remember who I used to be." Amanda sat down across from him, studying his face with new eyes. Without the assumption that he was a criminal, she began to see other things. Intelligence, yes, but also a deep weariness. The look of someone who had been carrying a terrible burden for a very long time. "Who were you before this?" she asked. Viktor was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I was DEA," he said finally. "Special Agent Viktor Kozlov, assigned to a joint task force investigating Russian organized crime in South Florida. That was my real name, my real job, until I stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to find." "What did you find?" "Evidence that some of my fellow agents were not just investigating criminal organizations, they were working with them, taking money to look the other way, providing advance warning of raids, even helping to eliminate witnesses and informants who got too close to the truth." Amanda leaned forward, drawn into Viktor's story despite herself. "What happened when you tried to report it?" Viktor's laugh was bitter. "I tried to go through proper channels. I reported my suspicions to my supervisor. I documented everything I had found. I followed protocol exactly. And 3 days later, I was arrested on charges of accepting bribes from the very organization I had been investigating. The evidence against me was manufactured, but it was convincing. Bank records showing deposits I had never made, surveillance photos of me meeting with known criminals, recorded conversations that had been edited to make me sound guilty." Amanda felt a chill run down her spine. "They framed you perfectly," Viktor confirmed. "I spent 6 months in federal prison while my lawyers tried to prove my innocence. By the time the charges were dropped for lack of evidence, my career was over. No law enforcement agency would touch me. I was radioactive, so you became what they accused you of being." "In a way," Viktor said, "I realized that the only way to gather evidence about the corruption was to operate outside the system. So I created a new identity, established connections with actual criminal organizations, and began working as an independent contractor." "Doing what?" Viktor's expression became uncomfortable. "Things I'm not proud of. Moving money, providing security, facilitating meetings between people who shouldn't be in the same room together. Nothing that directly hurt innocent people, but nothing I could put on a resume either." Amanda tried to process what Viktor was telling her. If his story was true, then he had spent the past 2 years living as a criminal in order to gather evidence about corrupt law enforcement officials. "The warehouse where we arrested you," she said. "That was all planned. Every detail," Viktor confirmed. "I've been feeding information to certain people in your department for months, letting them believe I was a valuable asset. The warehouse, the drugs, even my arrest. It was all designed to get me into a position where I could safely pass information to someone I could trust." "How did you know you could trust me?" Viktor smiled for the first time since their conversations had begun, and Amanda was surprised to see that it looked genuinely warm. "Because I've been watching you for 3 months, Agent Torres. I've seen how you handle cases, how you treat suspects, how you react when you think something isn't right. You're one of the few agents in this office who still cares more about justice than about advancement." Amanda felt exposed, knowing that Viktor had been studying her without her knowledge. But she also felt something else, a strange sense of validation, that someone had recognized the integrity she tried to maintain in a system that often rewarded compromise. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Viktor leaned forward, his pale blue eyes intense with purpose. "I want you to help me expose the network I've uncovered. I have evidence of corruption that goes beyond just taking drug money. These people have been involved in witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and possibly murder." "Murder?" 3 federal informants have died in the past year under suspicious circumstances. All of them were investigating connections between cartels and law enforcement. All of them died just before they were scheduled to provide testimony that would have implicated specific agents. Amanda thought about the implications of what Viktor was suggesting. If corrupt agents were willing to kill to protect their operations, then anyone who threatened to expose them would be in mortal danger. Including us, she said quietly. Especially us. Viktor confirmed. Which is why we need to move carefully and quickly. The longer this investigation takes, the more likely it is that someone will notice what you're doing. Amanda stood up and began pacing the small room, her mind racing through the options available to them. Every choice seemed to lead to disaster. If she reported Viktor's allegations through official channels, she risked alerting the same corrupt officials he was trying to expose. If she worked with him outside the system, she would be committing career suicide and possibly actual suicide. There's something else you need to know, Viktor said, watching her pace. The reason your drug bust was so successful, the reason you were able to arrest me and my associates so easily. Amanda stopped pacing and turned to face him. We were set up to be arrested, Viktor continued. Not by other criminals, but by people in your own department. They needed to eliminate us because we had become too close to discovering their operations. You're saying that my own colleagues tried to have you killed. I'm saying that your colleagues arranged for our arrest because they believed we would be killed in prison before we could reveal what we knew. The fact that we're still alive is either an oversight on their part or evidence that they have other plans for us. The implications hit Amanda like a physical blow. If Viktor was telling the truth, then her successful arrest had actually been a setup designed to eliminate witnesses to corruption within her own department. How do I know any of this is real? Amanda asked desperately. How do I know you're not just a very convincing criminal trying to manipulate me into helping you escape or undermine an investigation? Viktor reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small recording device. Because I have proof, he said simply. Recordings of conversations between corrupt agents and cartel representatives. Financial records showing money flows between law enforcement accounts and criminal organizations. Documents proving that evidence has been deliberately destroyed to protect certain individuals. He placed the device on the table between them. Everything is on here, Agent Torres. Enough evidence to bring down a dozen corrupt agents and expose a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Amanda stared at the recording device, knowing that listening to whatever was on it would be the final step in her transformation from law enforcement officer to whistleblower. What happens if we do this? She asked. What happens if we expose everything? Viktor's expression became infinitely sad. Some very dangerous people will do everything in their power to stop us. We'll be discredited, threatened, possibly killed. Our careers will be over, our reputations will be destroyed, and we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. And if we don't, then the corruption continues. More informants die. More criminals operate with protection from law enforcement. More agents cross the line from enforcing the law to breaking it. And eventually the entire system collapses under the weight of its own corruption. Amanda looked at Viktor, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected to find in an interrogation room. She saw a man who had sacrificed everything, his career, his identity, his safety, for the chance to expose a truth that needed to be told. But she also saw something else. She saw a mirror reflecting her own choice back at her. She could remain Agent Amanda Torres, loyal FBI employee who followed orders and trusted the system. Or she could become something else entirely. Someone who chose truth over security, justice over career advancement, principle over self-preservation. The clock on the wall continued its relentless ticking, marking the seconds until Amanda would have to decide who she wanted to be. The woman she had been, or the woman she might become. As she reached for the recording device, Amanda realized that Viktor hadn't just been manipulating her during their conversations. He had been offering her something far more valuable and dangerous than information. He had been offering her the chance to become the person she had always claimed to be. You know what they don't tell you about crossing the line from law enforcement officer to whistleblower. It doesn't happen all at once, like jumping off a cliff. It happens one small decision at a time, one compromise after another, until you look back and realize you're standing somewhere completely different from where you started. And by then, there's no way back to who you used to be. Amanda's fingers trembled as she picked up the recording device Viktor had placed on the table. The small black object felt impossibly heavy in her palm, as if it contained the weight of everything she thought she knew about justice, loyalty, and the system she had devoted her life to serving. Before you listen to that, Viktor said quietly, you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. Once you hear those recordings, you'll know things that will make you a target. There will be no pretending you're just an innocent agent who stumbled onto information by accident. Amanda looked up from the device to meet Viktor's pale blue eyes. In the harsh fluorescent light of the interrogation room, she could see lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the physical toll of living a double life for 2 years. How many people have died because of what's on here? She asked. 3 that I know of for certain, Viktor replied. Probably more that I haven't connected to the conspiracy yet. Amanda pressed the play button. The first voice she heard made her blood turn to ice. It was Agent Michael Brennan, her colleague, someone she had worked with on dozens of cases over the past 3 years. The next shipment comes in Thursday night. Brennan's recorded voice said, Pier 17, around 11 p.m. Make sure your people know that security will be light between 11:15 and 11:45. A second voice, heavily accented and unfamiliar, responded. And the payment? Same as always, 200,000 in the account by Friday morning. Or next time we won't be so cooperative. Amanda felt sick. She had worked the case Brennan was discussing. She remembered the frustration when their surveillance had failed to catch the drug runners, how the suspects had seemed to know exactly when and where law enforcement would be looking. Keep listening, Viktor said gently, watching her face. The next recording was even worse. This time it was Assistant Director Robert Chen's voice, someone Amanda had looked up to as a mentor and role model. The Martinez situation has been resolved, Chen was saying. She won't be testifying next week. Resolved how? Asked another voice. Car accident, very tragic. She was driving too fast on a rainy night, lost control, hit a tree. No survivors. Amanda remembered Rosa Martinez, a federal informant who had been scheduled to testify about connections between a drug cartel and law enforcement. The woman had died in a car crash just 3 days before her court appearance. At the time it had seemed like a terrible coincidence. That was no accident, Viktor said, reading her expression. Rosa Martinez was murdered because her testimony would have implicated Chen in taking bribes from the Morales cartel. The recordings continued for nearly an hour. Conversations about payments, discussions of upcoming raids that would be deliberately botched, casual references to eliminating problems that could expose the conspiracy. By the time the device fell silent, Amanda felt like she was going to vomit. "My God," she whispered. "How many people are involved?" "At least 12 agents in this field office," Viktor replied. "Possibly more in other districts. The network is bigger than I initially suspected." Amanda stood up and began pacing the small room, her mind racing through the implications of what she had just heard. Every successful case she had worked, every arrest she had made, every conviction she had helped secure, how many of them had been real, and how many had been theater designed to hide the real corruption. "How did you get these recordings?" she asked. Viktor's expression became uncomfortable. "Some of them I recorded myself during meetings, where I was present as a facilitator or intermediary. Others I obtained through electronic surveillance that wasn't exactly legal. You've been wiretapping FBI agents. I've been documenting criminal activity by people who happen to be FBI agents," Viktor corrected. "There's a difference." Amanda stopped pacing and faced him directly. "Is there? Because what you've done, impersonating a criminal, conducting illegal surveillance, gathering evidence without warrants, that's exactly the kind of behavior that destroys cases in court." Viktor nodded slowly. "You're right. Every piece of evidence I've gathered would be thrown out if this went to trial through normal channels. That's why we can't handle this through the traditional justice system. Then how do we handle it? We expose it publicly. Media, congressional committees, internal affairs departments in other agencies. We make the corruption so public that it can't be covered up or dismissed." Amanda felt a chill run down her spine. "You're talking about destroying the careers and lives of people I work with every day. People who might be innocent of the charges you're making. And you're talking about protecting a system that has murdered at least 3 federal informants to keep them quiet." Viktor shot back. "How many more people have to die before you decide that justice is more important than loyalty to corrupt colleagues?" The argument hung between them like a physical barrier. Amanda could see that Viktor genuinely believed he was fighting for justice, but she could also see how his years of operating outside the law had changed him, made him willing to sacrifice innocent people in pursuit of his greater cause. "There has to be another way," she said. "Some way to expose the corruption without destroying everyone in the process." Viktor was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Tell me something, Agent Torres," he said finally. "In your 8 years with the Bureau, how many times have you seen internal investigations actually result in meaningful punishment for corrupt agents?" Amanda thought about it honestly. She had seen agents censured, transferred, given desk duty. She had seen a few early retirements and resignations, but actual criminal prosecutions of federal agents, actual prison time for corruption, she could count those cases on one hand. "The system protects itself," Viktor continued, reading her silence. "It always has. The only way to break that protection is to go outside the system entirely." "And what happens to us when we do that?" Amanda asked. "What happens to our lives, our careers, our safety?" Viktor's smile was infinitely sad. "We become what I've been for the past 2 years. Ghosts. People who exist in the spaces between official reality and actual truth. It's not a life I would recommend to anyone." Amanda sat back down across from him, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. "There's something else you need to know," Viktor said. "Something about why I chose you specifically for this conversation." Amanda felt her stomach tighten. Every time Viktor revealed new information, it made her situation more complicated and dangerous. 3 months ago, I was approached by someone who claimed to represent a group of honest agents within the Bureau. People who suspected that corruption existed but couldn't prove it, who were looking for ways to expose the truth without destroying their own careers in the process. Who was it? I never learned their real identity. We communicated through intermediaries, encrypted messages, dead drops. But they provided me with information about which agents could be trusted and which ones were definitely part of the conspiracy. Viktor leaned forward, his pale blue eyes intense. Your name was at the top of their trust list, Agent Torres. They specifically recommended you as someone who would choose justice over loyalty, truth over convenience, even if it cost you everything. Amanda felt a mixture of pride and terror. Someone within the bureau had been watching her, evaluating her, deciding that she was the kind of person who would risk everything for the right cause. But that also meant that her involvement in this conspiracy was not accidental. She had been selected, chosen, manipulated into this position. How do I know you're not working for the same corrupt agents you claim to be exposing? She asked. How do I know this isn't all an elaborate test to see if I can be trusted? Viktor reached across the table and took her hands in his, a gesture that would have seemed inappropriate in any other context, but somehow felt necessary given the magnitude of what they were discussing. You don't know, he said simply. That's the terrible truth about situations like this. You can't know who to trust, what information is real, what motives are genuine. You have to make decisions based on incomplete information and hope that you're choosing the right side. Amanda stared into Viktor's eyes, searching for signs of deception, manipulation, hidden agendas. What she found instead was exhaustion, determination, and something that looked like genuine remorse. Why did you become a federal agent? Viktor asked suddenly. The question caught Amanda off guard. What does that have to do with anything? Humor me. Amanda thought back to her college years, to the idealistic young woman who had believed that law enforcement was about protecting innocent people and bringing criminals to justice. I wanted to make a difference, she said. I wanted to be part of something that mattered, something that made the world safer and more just. And do you feel like you've accomplished that goal working for the Bureau? Amanda considered the question honestly. In 8 years as an FBI agent, how many innocent people had she actually protected? How many real criminals had she brought to justice? How many of her cases had been genuine victories for the cause of justice? And how many had been elaborate theater designed to hide the real crimes being committed by her own colleagues? I don't know anymore, she admitted. Viktor squeezed her hands gently. That's the first honest thing anyone in law enforcement has said to me in 2 years. As Amanda sat in that sterile interrogation room, holding hands with a man who might be either her salvation or her destruction, she realized that she had already made her choice. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through a series of small decisions that had led her to this moment. She had chosen to listen to Viktor's accusations instead of dismissing them. She had chosen to investigate the bank account he gave her instead of reporting him immediately. She had chosen to return to hear more of his story, instead of walking away and forgetting everything he had told her. Each choice had been small, defensible, reasonable, but together they had brought her to a point where she could no longer pretend to be just an innocent agent stumbling onto information by accident. She was now a co-conspirator in whatever Viktor was planning, whether she wanted to be or not. What happens next? She asked. Viktor released her hands and leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming businesslike. Now we plan how to expose the corruption without getting ourselves killed in the process. The most dangerous moment in any conspiracy isn't when you're gathering evidence or planning your exposure. It's the moment right after you've committed to action, when you're most vulnerable because you've crossed the line but haven't yet completed your mission. That's when your enemies are most likely to strike, when they still have the element of surprise and you're not yet protected by public scrutiny. Amanda Torres, was about to learn this lesson the hard way. The plan Viktor outlined was both elegant and terrifying in its simplicity. They would compile all the evidence, the recordings, the financial records, the documentation of murdered informants, into a comprehensive package that would be simultaneously released to major news outlets, congressional oversight committees, and internal affairs departments in multiple law enforcement agencies. The key is coordination, Viktor explained during their fourth secret meeting, this one taking place in a small conference room that Amanda had reserved under the pretense of reviewing case files. If we release the information to just one outlet, it can be discredited, suppressed, or explained away. But if it hits everywhere at once, it becomes impossible to contain. Amanda had spent the past week living a double life that was slowly destroying her sanity. During the day, she performed her regular duties as an FBI agent, working cases, filing reports, interacting with colleagues who might be either innocent co-workers or criminal conspirators. At night, she met secretly with Viktor to plan the exposure of a corruption network that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. The psychological strain was enormous. Every conversation with a fellow agent became an exercise in paranoia. Every case assignment felt like a potential trap. Every routine request for information made her wonder if she was being tested, watched, evaluated for signs of disloyalty. But it was during their fifth meeting that Amanda realized just how dangerous their situation had become. "We have a problem," Viktor said as soon as she entered the conference room. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled anxiety. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that gets people killed," Viktor replied grimly. "I think they know about us." Amanda felt the blood drain from her face. "How?" Viktor pulled out his cell phone and played a voicemail message. The voice was electronically disguised, but the words were clear enough: "Stop digging or join the others who dug too deep." "When did you get this?" Amanda asked. "This morning, but that's not the worst part." Viktor scrolled through his phone and showed her a series of text messages. "I've been getting these all week." The messages were simple but chilling. Rosa Martinez thought she was safe too. "Car accidents happen to everyone. 3 strikes, and you're out. Guess what number you're on?" Amanda stared at the messages, her mind racing through the implications. If the corrupt agents knew about Viktor, they almost certainly knew about her involvement as well. "We need to accelerate the timeline," she said. "Get the information out before they can stop us." Viktor shook his head. "It's too late for that. I think they're planning to eliminate us before we can release anything." As if summoned by his words, Amanda's cell phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID showed her supervisor, Assistant Director Robert Chen, one of the agents Viktor's recordings had implicated in the conspiracy. "Answer it," Viktor said quietly. "Act normal." Amanda took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Torres here." "Amanda, I need you to come to my office immediately." Chen's voice carried an urgency she had never heard before. "There's been a development in the Kozlov case that requires your immediate attention." "What kind of development?" "Not over the phone. Get here now." The call ended abruptly, leaving Amanda staring at her phone with growing dread. "That was Chen," she told Viktor. "He wants to see me immediately about your case." Viktor's face went pale. "They're moving faster than I expected. We need to get you out of here. Now. I can't just disappear. That would confirm their suspicions and destroy any chance we have of exposing them. And going to Chen's office could get you killed." Viktor shot back. "Think about it, Amanda. Rosa Martinez was murdered 3 days before she was supposed to testify. How convenient would it be if the FBI agent investigating corruption in the Bureau had a tragic accident right before she could reveal what she discovered? Amanda stood up and began pacing the small conference room, her mind racing through their limited options. Every choice seemed to lead to disaster. If she ran, she would be confirming their suspicions and abandoning any chance of exposing the corruption. If she stayed, she might be walking into a trap that would end with her death. There's another option, Viktor said quietly. We release everything right now, incomplete as it is. Go public immediately, before they can stop us. With what platform? We don't have media contacts, congressional connections, or any way to ensure the information gets proper attention. Viktor smiled grimly and pulled out a different cell phone, one Amanda hadn't seen before. Remember I told you about the group of honest agents who contacted me? The ones who recommended you as trustworthy? Amanda nodded. They've been preparing for this possibility. They have connections with investigative journalists, congressional staff members, and internal affairs investigators in other agencies. All we need to do is send them the signal, and they'll coordinate the release of everything we've gathered. What's the signal? Viktor showed her the phone. It was a simple flip phone, old-fashioned and basic. One text message to a specific number. That's all it takes. Amanda stared at the phone, realizing that they were at the point of no return. Sending that message would unleash forces beyond their control, would expose corruption that reached into the highest levels of government, would destroy careers and possibly lives. But not sending it might mean that she and Viktor would be murdered to protect the very corruption they were trying to expose. Before I make this decision, Amanda said, I need to know something. How do I know that the group of honest agents you're talking about actually exists? How do I know this isn't all part of some elaborate setup? Viktor met her eyes directly, and she saw something there that convinced her more than any words could have. You don't know, he said simply. Just like I don't know if you're really the honest agent you appear to be, or if you're playing a longer game than I can see. Just like neither of us knows who we can really trust in, a system that's been compromised at every level. He held up the phone. All we can do is make the choice that feels right, based on incomplete information and imperfect knowledge, and hope that we're choosing justice over corruption, truth over lies, the greater good over our own safety. Amanda looked at Viktor, really looked at him, and saw a man who had sacrificed everything, his career, his identity, his safety, his peace of mind, for the chance to expose a truth that needed to be told. He might be manipulating her, might be part of an elaborate conspiracy designed to test her loyalty or eliminate her as a threat. But in this moment, she believed that his commitment to justice was genuine. Send the message, she said. Viktor typed a single word, Dawn, and hit send. Within seconds, the phone buzzed with a reply. Message received. 30 minutes. What happens in 30 minutes? Amanda asked. Everything, Viktor replied. In 30 minutes, every major news outlet in the country will simultaneously receive copies of all the evidence we've gathered. Congressional oversight committees will be notified. Internal affairs departments in multiple agencies will be contacted. The story will be everywhere at once. Amanda felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. They had done it. They had exposed the corruption, but they had also painted targets on their backs that would never disappear. We need to get out of here, Viktor said, standing up quickly. Once the story breaks, this building is going to become very dangerous for both of us. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Amanda's phone rang again. Chen, calling back. I have to answer this, she told Viktor. If I don't, he'll send security to find me. Viktor nodded grimly. Torres, Amanda said, accepting the call. Where are you? Chen's voice was sharp with suspicion. I told you to get to my office immediately. I'm in conference room C reviewing the Kozlov files. I'll be right up. No, Chen said quickly. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you. The call ended, and Amanda looked at Viktor with growing panic. He's coming here. Right now. Viktor moved to the conference room door and locked it, though they both knew it wouldn't hold against determined opposition for long. How long do we have? Amanda asked. Viktor checked his phone. 26 minutes until the story breaks. We just need to survive for 26 minutes. As they heard footsteps approaching in the hallway outside, Amanda Torres realized that she was about to find out whether her choice to trust Viktor had been an act of courage or the last mistake she would ever make. The footsteps stopped outside their door, and someone tried the handle. Agent Torres, Chen's voice called through the door. Open up. We need to talk. Amanda and Viktor looked at each other, both understanding that the next few minutes would determine whether justice would be served or whether they would become the latest casualties in a war between corruption and truth that had been raging in the shadows of law enforcement for far too long. 26 minutes felt like a lifetime, but it was all the time they had. Sometimes the most important battles in the war between good and evil happen in the most ordinary places. Not on battlefields or in courtrooms, but in sterile conference rooms where two people face impossible choices with the clock ticking toward an uncertain future. Agent Torres, Chen's voice came through the door again, more insistent now. I know you're in there. We really need to talk. Amanda looked at Viktor, who was standing by the window, checking whether there was any way to escape from the third-floor conference room. The drop to the parking lot below would be fatal. Answer him, Viktor whispered. Buy us time. Amanda moved closer to the door but didn't unlock it. I'll be out in just a minute, Director Chen. I'm finishing up some important documentation on the Kozlov case. The documentation can wait. This is urgent, Agent Torres. Open the door. Through the small window in the conference room door, Amanda could see Chen standing in the hallway, but he wasn't alone. Two other men were with him, agents she didn't recognize, wearing the kind of serious expressions that suggested they weren't here for a friendly conversation. Viktor checked his phone. 22 minutes. Amanda. Chen's voice took on a tone of false concern. I'm worried about you. There have been some serious allegations made about your recent activities. I'm here to help, but I can only do that if you cooperate. Amanda called back, though she already suspected the answer. Allegations that you've been compromised by the suspect you've been interrogating, that you've been passing information to criminal elements, that you may be involved in activities that threaten national security. Amanda felt her heart pounding. They were going to frame her, just as they had framed Viktor years earlier. Create evidence of corruption and betrayal, destroy her credibility before she could expose theirs. Viktor moved to stand beside her, and she was surprised to see that he looked calmer now than he had since they started their conspiracy. Not peaceful exactly, but resolved. Like a man who had made his peace with whatever was about to happen. You know what the truly frightening thing about this moment is, he said quietly. It's not that we might die. It's that if we do, the corruption continues. More informants get murdered, more criminals operate with law enforcement protection, more agents cross the line from enforcing the law to breaking it. Agent Torres. Chen's voice was becoming sharper, more authoritative. I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm going to have maintenance unlock this door. 1, 2. Amanda thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. Her childhood dreams of serving justice, her years of training and dedication, her slow realization that the system she served was more corrupt than she had ever imagined. 3. 4. She thought about Rosa Martinez, the federal informant who had died in a convenient car accident. About the other murdered witnesses Viktor had told her about. About how many more people would die if the corruption network remained protected. 5. 6. Viktor showed her his phone. 18 minutes. 7. 8. Amanda made her decision. Director Chen. She called through the door. I want you to know that I've discovered evidence of widespread corruption within this field office. Evidence that implicates you and at least 11 other agents in taking money from drug cartels and murdering federal informants. Silence from the hallway. I want you to know that this evidence is going to be released to the media and congressional oversight committees in less than 18 minutes, regardless of what happens to me. More silence. And I want you to know that I've documented everything about our conversation today, including your attempt to intimidate me into silence. Viktor smiled at her, and for the first time since they had met, his smile looked like approval rather than manipulation. 9. Chen said finally. 10. The door lock disengaged with an electronic beep, and Chen entered the conference room, followed by the 2 unknown agents. Up close, Amanda could see that they weren't typical FBI personnel. They moved with the fluid precision of military operators, and their eyes held the cold professionalism of people who had killed before and would do so again without hesitation. Agent Torres, Chen said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his authority. You've gotten yourself involved in something very dangerous, something that threatens not just your career, but your life. I'm aware of the risks, Amanda replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Chen's gaze shifted to Viktor. And you, I have to admit, I'm impressed. 2 years of deep cover work, building relationships, gathering intelligence. Very professional. Under different circumstances, I might have tried to recruit you. Viktor's expression remained neutral. I've already been recruited. By people who believe in actual justice rather than profitable corruption. One of the unknown agents moved closer to the window, effectively cutting off their only potential escape route. The other positioned himself by the door. Amanda realized that they were being contained with military precision. Here's what's going to happen, Chen said, settling into one of the conference room chairs as if this were a routine meeting. You're both going to have tragic accidents. Agent Torres will be found in her apartment tonight, apparently having committed suicide over the stress of investigating corruption allegations she couldn't prove. Very sad. Viktor will be found dead in his cell, apparently killed by other inmates who discovered his cooperation with law enforcement. Amanda felt ice forming in her veins. And you think that will end the investigation? Chen smiled. What investigation? The only people who knew about your allegations were the 2 of you. With you both dead, there's no one left to pursue the matter. Except for the evidence we've already compiled, Viktor said quietly. Evidence that's going to be released regardless of what happens to us. Chen's smile faltered slightly. What evidence? Viktor checked his phone again. 14 minutes and 30 seconds worth of evidence. For the first time, Amanda saw uncertainty flicker across Chen's face. He pulled out his own phone and made a quick call. We may have a problem, he said into the phone. They claim to have distributed evidence that's going to be released automatically. A pause as he listened. No, they're both here, contained. Another pause. Understood. Chen ended the call and looked at them with renewed confidence. My colleagues have just informed me that they've been monitoring all your communications for the past week. Electronic surveillance, physical surveillance, even your supposedly secure meetings. There is no evidence being released, no media contacts, no congressional notifications. There's just two people who got in over their heads and are about to pay the price. Amanda felt her hope crumbling. If Chen was telling the truth, then their entire plan had been compromised from the beginning. The message Viktor had sent, the countdown to exposure, the hope that justice would finally be served, all of it had been an elaborate illusion. But Viktor was still checking his phone, still counting down the minutes. Either he genuinely believed their plan was real, or he was maintaining the illusion even in the face of death. 11 minutes, he said calmly. Chen stood up and nodded to the two operatives. Make it clean. Suicide for her, prison violence for him. No evidence, no witnesses, no loose ends. As the operatives moved toward them, Amanda closed her eyes and thought about her father, the police officer who had taught her that sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting consequences you couldn't control. She thought about Rosa Martinez and the other murdered informants who had died trying to expose the truth. She thought about the ideal of justice she had served her entire adult life, even when the system itself had become corrupted beyond recognition. She opened her eyes to see Viktor looking at his phone one more time. Time, he said simply. And then, as if summoned by his words, every phone in the room began buzzing simultaneously. Chen pulled out his device, his face going pale as he read whatever message had just arrived. The two operatives checked their phones as well, their professional composure cracking for the first time. What the hell is this? Chen demanded. Viktor smiled, and Amanda realized that his confidence had been genuine all along. That, Viktor said, is the sound of justice finally being served. Amanda's phone showed multiple news alerts flooding her screen. Breaking: FBI corruption network exposed. Federal agents accused of drug money. Murder. Congressional committee calls for immediate investigation. DOJ launches federal task force into law enforcement corruption. The conference room fell silent, except for the continued buzzing of phones as more and more notifications arrived. Chen stared at his phone in disbelief. This is impossible. We were monitoring everything. You were monitoring everything you knew about, Viktor corrected. But you didn't know about the backup plans, the redundant systems, the people who were prepared for exactly this situation. One of the operatives moved toward the door, apparently receiving new instructions through an earpiece. Stand down, he said to his partner. The situation has changed. Chen looked around the room, like a man watching his world collapse in real time. You have no idea what you've done, he said to Amanda and Viktor. The people you're exposing, the operations you're compromising, this goes deeper than just drug money. You've just destroyed years of carefully constructed intelligence networks. Good, Amanda said simply. As sirens began wailing in the distance, whether they were coming to arrest Chen or to protect him, Amanda couldn't tell. She realized that their ordeal wasn't over. It was just beginning. They would face investigation, interrogation, threats, and attempts to discredit everything they had revealed. But they had succeeded in the most important way possible. The truth was finally public. The corruption was exposed. The murders could no longer be covered up. Viktor looked at his phone one more time, then placed it on the conference table. Agent Torres, he said formally, it's been an honor serving justice with you. As federal agents swarmed into the building, and the conference room filled with people whose loyalties Amanda couldn't determine, she realized that Viktor had been right about one thing from the very beginning. Sometimes the most broken people are the ones who can help you fix a broken world. 6 months later, Amanda Torres sat in a congressional hearing room, preparing to testify before the House Committee on Government Oversight about the corruption network she and Viktor had exposed. The aftermath had been even more chaotic than they had anticipated. 12 FBI agents had been arrested, including Assistant Director Chen. 3 more had committed suicide rather than face prosecution. The investigation had expanded to include other field offices, other agencies, other networks of corruption that had been operating in the shadows of law enforcement. Viktor had been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony and cooperation with federal investigators. His charges had been dropped, his record cleared, his service as a deep-cover operative officially recognized. But Amanda knew that recognition came at a cost. He would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering if the enemies he had made would eventually find a way to silence him permanently. As for Amanda herself, she had resigned from the FBI, not because she was forced to, but because she could no longer work within a system she now understood was fundamentally compromised. She had accepted a position with a non-profit organization that investigated government corruption and supported whistleblowers. The hearing room filled with reporters, congressional staff and family members of the murdered informants. Rosa Martinez's daughter was there, finally getting the answers she had been seeking about her mother's death. When Amanda was called to testify, she thought about the scared young woman who had entered that interrogation room 6 months earlier, believing she was conducting a routine drug investigation. That woman had died in the conference room where she chose truth over safety, justice over career advancement, principle over self-preservation. The woman who took the stand was someone entirely different. Someone who had learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is choose to trust the right person at the right moment, even when you can't be certain who that person really is. "State your name for the record," the committee chairman said. "Amanda Torres, former special agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Miss Torres, in your own words, please tell this committee what you discovered about corruption within federal law enforcement." Amanda looked out at the packed hearing room, at the cameras that would carry her words to millions of people, at the faces of family members who had finally gotten the justice their loved ones deserved. "I discovered that sometimes the person who looks like your enemy is actually the only one trying to save you," she said. "And sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who will destroy everything you believe in to protect their own interests." As she began her formal testimony, Amanda thought about Viktor, who was somewhere in witness protection, living under another assumed identity, continuing his work of exposing corruption from the shadows. They had saved each other, she realized, not through manipulation or deception, but through the simple act of choosing to believe that truth and justice were worth any sacrifice. What would you have done in Amanda's place? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more federal secrets that expose how power really works when nobody is watching.